Welcome to this explainer. Let's just dive right in, because we are going on a truly wild historical journey today. We're going to explore humanity's absolute oldest instinct, and this incredible centuries-long tension between care and containment. Basically, this is the story of how we, as a species, have treated the most vulnerable among us, specifically people whose minds just work differently. It's a story that is full of surprising compassion, some truly devastating darkness, and a pendulum of medical care that has swung so wildly back and forth across human history.
To kick things off, I want you to picture a cave in Iraq. We're talking 46,000 years ago. Archaeologists found a skeleton there that literally shatters the story we usually tell ourselves about our ancestors. This man had survived for years with a withered right arm, a missing hand, and blindness in one eye. In a harsh, prehistoric world, he couldn't hunt, he couldn't defend himself. By the cold logic of nature, he should have perished quickly. Yet, he lived. And that brings up a really fascinating, almost haunting question. If ancient humans actively cared for the physically disabled, what did they do with those whose minds were fractured?
Well, the answer, which completely flips our expectations of ancient brutality, is that they cared for them. We're so used to this idea of survival of the fittest, right? We assume it meant the absolute abandonment of anyone who couldn't pull their weight. We picture this ruthless, highly efficient past. But the bones, they keep telling us a very different, much more human story. Early communities actually made an active, conscious choice to keep vulnerable people alive. The oldest known acts of human compassion aren't found in ancient poetry or grand temples. They're found in the bones of people who lived way longer than they supposedly should have.
And look, we really need to understand that severe mental illness isn't just some modern invention. It didn't suddenly pop up with the Industrial Revolution or, the stress of smartphones. Conditions like schizophrenia affect roughly 1% of every human population ever studied. That means everywhere, in every century, and in every single culture across the globe, about 1 in 100 people experiences the world in a radically different way, hearing voices or seeing things that others simply cannot. The exact same architecture of the brain that allowed us to build civilizations is the brain that can, sometimes, turn on itself.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the stark contrast in these cultural experiences. Back in a landmark 2015 study, researchers found that in Ghana and Vietnam, patients often reported the voices they heard as familiar, sometimes actually helpful, or even deeply spiritual, like the voice of an ancestor. But in the United States, those exact same symptoms were experienced as hostile, threatening, and basically meaningless. The crucial takeaway here is that the story a culture tells about madness completely changes what the illness actually feels like from the inside.
So in the ancient world, that cultural story was almost entirely supernatural. If someone started hearing voices or seeing visions, they weren't viewed as broken or malfunctioning. They were seen as a doorway to the divine. This is where we get the concept of the shaman, a figure standing right at the boundary between the ordinary world and the spirit realm. What we would clinically diagnose today as severe mental illness, prehistoric and ancient societies often just integrated into their communities. They revere these altered states as really profound spiritual gifts.
Let's track how this builds over time, because the human approach to madness didn't just sit still, it swung back and forth like a giant pendulum. Around 1550 BCE, ancient Egyptians were actually prescribing physical remedies and early talking cures for mental despair. Then by the 5th century BCE, the Greek physician Hippocrates makes this radical claim that mental illness is a brain disease, not demonic possession. Fast forward to 705 CE, we see the first dedicated psychiatric hospitals popping up in Baghdad. But then, we jump to 1547 CE, and we witness the terrifying rise of Bedlam in Europe. The pendulum swings completely from care to containment.
Which brings us right into our first major shift, the first hospitals, and the Islamic Golden Age.
So, picture the year 705 CE. While a whole lot of Europe is still leaning super heavily on supernatural explanations, we see a massive milestone, the establishment of the very first dedicated psychiatric hospital in the entire world, right in Baghdad. At a time when European medicine had basically stalled out, Islamic physicians were conducting actual clinical psychiatry. They were classifying different types of psychosis, debating the causes, and systematically developing real medical treatments.
This era gave us absolutely brilliant minds, like the 9th century physician Al-Razi. Just look at this revolutionary quote from him. "Mental illness is a disease of the brain, not the soul, requiring physicians, not priests." I mean, think about how incredibly advanced that is. Centuries before we had modern brain imaging or neuroscience, Al-Razi diagnosed psychosis as a physiological, medical condition. He was echoing what Hippocrates had said centuries earlier, a profound truth that much of the world had, tragically, completely forgotten.
But sadly, that clinical truth did not stick everywhere. That leads us right into the Dark Era and a very real descent into Bedlam.
And this brilliantly illustrates the vast divide in human thought at the time.
On the left, you've got Baghdad's deeply clinical, brain-based medical approach, but on the right, you have the approach of the European Middle Ages, where madness was viewed as literal demonic possession. And think about it, if you truly believe a patient is possessed by a demon, your treatment isn't going to be a hospital bed. It's isolation, starvation, and violent exorcism, all designed to make the body so unbearable that the evil spirit finally flees. It was just a desperate, horrific methodology.
This whole philosophy of just containing people reached a terrifying peak in 1547. That's when the Bethlehem Royal Hospital in London was formally established. You probably know it by the corruption of its name, Bedlam. It literally became the dictionary synonym for chaos and madness. Bethlehem was absolutely not a place of healing. It was a place where human suffering was quite literally put on display.
And here's the truly horrific part about it. Bethlehem actually charged admission. Let that sink in for a second. For much of its history, the public actually paid money to walk through the halls and stare at isolated, bound, suffering human beings purely for entertainment. It was treated as a spectacle, like a bizarre Sunday outing for the public to just gawk at the patients and, I guess, reassure themselves of their own sanity. Compassion was entirely absent from the equation.
But human history is a pendulum, right? The darkness didn't last forever. We ascend now into the bright era, humanistic reform.
This era is really defined by three absolute champions of humanism. These were people who looked at the absolute nightmare of the asylum system and systematically began tearing down the walls, both physical and ideological. Over in France, you had Philippe Pinel, who literally began unchaining patients. In America, Dorothea Dix lobbied relentlessly to create humane asylums. And in England, William Tuke founded the York Retreat. Their core philosophy was revolutionary, but honestly, it was also deeply ancient. They absolutely refused to treat patients like animals or dangerous cargo that just needed to be warehoused. They successfully ended that grotesque era of public spectacle. And most importantly, they championed compassion and dignity over cruel containment. By doing that, they essentially reconnected modern medicine with that ancient, 46,000-year-old impulse, the simple, profound act of providing structured care to a vulnerable human being. So, what does this all mean for us today? Because sure, we've advanced incredibly through science and medicine, but our society still wrestles with this exact same tension. We still underfund mental health care globally. We still battle these deep ingrained societal stigmas, and we constantly negotiate that delicate line between giving people the freedom they deserve and the treatment they so desperately need. It's the eternal modern struggle, compassion versus fear.
I want to leave you with a final, lingering thought here. The bones of that ancient man in the Iraqi cave prove something incredible. The oldest human instinct on record is the decision that a suffering person is worth staying for.